7 years later, the U.S. Patent Office issued a one-sentence decree. You can patent anything in the world that's alive except a full-birth human being.
The Supreme Court of the United States ruled today that living organisms produced in the laboratory may be patented. This decision to extend
the U.S. Supreme Court had to decide was whether one man or one company should be able to control new forms of life.
We allow a company or college to exclusively own a species. What does that say about our reverence for life?
Quote, Doctors Wood and Robertson were asked their opinion regarding the priming of human populations for pandemic flu using live viral vaccines, and if they consider it to be a good idea.
The Academy of Science recently gave its top honor to a University of Texas biologist who says the Earth would be better off if 90% of the human population was wiped out.
Mr. Speaker, last week's New York Times Magazine featured an interview with Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Some of her comments were absolutely astonishing, coming from a sitting Supreme Court justice. Quote, frankly, I had thought that at the time Roe was decided, there was concern about population growth, and particularly growth in populations that we don't want to have too many of.
The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. But the controversies which have erupted at the conference illustrate the problem of coming to grips with issues that are deeply divisive and which have a profound moral dimension. The United Nations can and should play an essential role in helping the world find a satisfactory way of stabilizing world population. The United Nations should certainly be among the catalysts and coordinators of this process.
Erected by a secretive group, the Georgia Guidestones are a testament to the elite's plan. And set in stone, it is written that the population never rise above 500 million.
In the draft copy of the United Nations Global Biodiversity Assessment, it states very clearly that we must reduce the human population from its current level of about 6 billion people down to about 1 billion people.
The Kissinger-authored U.S. plan targeted 13 key countries where massive population reduction was called for. Kissinger recommended that IMF and World Bank loans be given on condition that nations initiate aggressive population control programs.
We've seen now there's a type of foreign assistance for vaccines or for AIDS treatment that are incredibly effective. These are all about saving lives. And the good news is that as you make those breakthroughs, the population growth in the country goes down.
Dr. Emanuel wrote last October 12th that a crisis, war, and financial collapse would get the frightened public to accept the program.
It's the vaccine that can't come soon enough. According to The Independent, those first doses could be given out before results verifying its safety are even available.
Katie, I totally get it. This is a totally charged issue. But remember, aside from clean water, nothing has saved more lives than vaccines.
This public health advert is from America's swine flu scare of 1976. Then a vaccine was released before extensive testing. And while swine flu only killed one person, side effects from the jabs caused 25 deaths.
Get a shot of protection. The swine flu.
An American investigative journalist who claims that swine flu strains have been engineered in 2 universities in the US and Canada says they've been deliberately designed to resist vaccines.
It was determined that this particular flu was gene spliced from 2 forms of human flu, 2 forms of swine flu, and 1 form of human flu. The problem is when they looked at the molecular clock of this enzyme, they determined that it was rapidly mutating in humans. The problem with that is, of course, any new mutated version of this particular virus would be immune to any vaccine already created to handle the previous type of virus.
They don't call them viruses anymore. They call them, quote, mock-up files. They're laboratory recombinants, genetically modified, mutated, hybridized, new laboratory creations that they don't even want to alert or alarm the public, so they have new names, new terminology.
Also claiming, Wayne, just finally, that the World Health Organization is aware of this this nightmare scenario, as you call it, and is actually suppressing all this. Now, how do you know that, and why would they be suppressing such an alarming situation if it is true?
I was told by the research community that there were two meetings on this particular strain of flu, one in Vietnam and one in Hong Kong. Both of those were unusually closed to the public and to the press. That was a unique situation. The other thing is that we may be on something here that begs of a criminal investigation. The 4 labs that I was told are involved in this development, the genetic development, this particular influenza, are the Biosafety Level 4 laboratory at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, the Armed Forces Pathology Institute in Rockville, Maryland, and the U.S. Army Infectious Disease Laboratory in Fort Detrick, as well as the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, in addition to the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg in Canada. It would seem that with the feeling that this could have been genetically engineered on purpose, that this begs of a FBI and Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigation.
I talked to the scientists, then I went and I talked to the federal bureaucrats who are defending thimerosal, and I said, what are you relying on? And I looked at the science they're relying on, and I can tell you, Joe, it is so weak, and you and I have seen, legal practice with junk science, and we know, what these phony scientists are who create this stuff.
Big tobacco.
Right, and they're working with the pharmaceutical industry, and we now have the transcripts of this secret meeting that they did in Simpsonwood, Georgia in the year 2000, and it's the most horrifying thing that you can read, Joe. There's scientists there from the government who are saying,
very, very badly let down by what is supposedly the upper echelons of science, the final arbiters of whether something is real or not real. And I was particularly dismayed because I had access to the closed session minutes that had been subpoenaed from the previous IO meeting, where it became clear, it was explicit, that the sponsoring agency, the Centers for Disease Control, had instructed the IOM to come to a negative finding. And that was alarming to me. And it was clearly borne out by the decision they took at the end of that meeting, that there was no link. And that went against much of the science that's been published, much of the biological plausibility, and the call for an end to research into vaccines and autism was simply a disgrace.
In our morning meeting, get your child vaccinated or risk going to jail.
If your child isn't vaccinated, you could be looking at a fine or even jail time. That's what's happening now.
It is absolutely important that all children are vaccinated because, number one, that is our law.
Why jail time, Betty? Isn't that a little extreme?
Well, what's happening is it's really not about jail time. What it's about is giving a little extra encouragement to those parents who have been derelict up until this point.
Well, it's quite Orwellian to call jail time encouragement.
And as long as I've been on this planet, I don't think I've seen anything like this before.
Some New York hospital workers are fighting back.
It's very disconcerting to me.
Refusing to take the seasonal flu or the H1N1 vaccine mandated by the New York State Health Department for healthcare workers statewide.
It reminds me of the 1976 swine flu pandemic that was out. They did that. They created such a panic that people rushed to get these vaccines, and over 4,000 people became disabled in one way or another from those vaccines.
Getting the shot is not 100% guarantee that you won't get the flu.
Even if long-term problems are unlikely. These workers say they'll be protesting at the state capitol on Tuesday as they're left with the choice: keep their jobs and get the shots, or be out of work just before Christmas.
2007, President Bush signed the National Security Presidential Directive 51.
Most Americans would agree that it would be prudent to have a plan to provide for the continuity of government. They have such a plan.
Beginning in October, the Army plans to station an active unit inside the United States.
Why is the media on one hand saying there are no FEMA camps, but on the other hand, legislation has been introduced to build them? Here's H.R. 645 legalizing what has already been developed, what's already been paid for by FEMA.
The government doesn't build things that are not needed or that there aren't contingency plans that say there's a reason for them.
Polyguard vaults, and you go to their website, and we also have photos of the trucks, giant 18-wheelers. and they're just all there. Now, we know this is FEMA. We know that these are coffins. Some people are debating that because we have all the news articles where it says FEMA's ordered coffins and body bags by the millions. This is just one stockpile just a few miles away from the Atlanta airport, which is the largest airport in the United States. Now, the FEMA and the CDC say that they're, by the way, this is nearby the CDC, Center for Disease Control. They say that they're only doing this in case there's a mass biological outbreak.